moved into my new house on a quiet suburban street in early spring. It wasn't anything fancy, 2 stories, modest yard, and a driveway that could fit 2 cars, but it had that warm feeling you get when you know it's home. I'd been looking for months, bouncing between apartments and homes, and when I walked into this one, I just knew. It smelled faintly of old wood polish and sun-dried curtains, a scent that somehow made the place feel alive. The street was quiet, almost too quiet, except for the occasional bark of a dog somewhere down the block or the faint rumble of a lawnmower from a neighbor preparing for the weekend. Most houses had been lived in for decades, well-kept lawns, flower beds neatly trimmed, and a few kids' bikes lying on driveways. I liked it. It felt safe. At least that's what I thought at first. My first real encounter with my neighbor came a week after moving in. I was unloading boxes from my car when an older man in a baseball cap walked over, smiling politely. "New here, huh?" he asked. His voice was calm, almost soothing. "I'm Martin. Been on this street for, I guess 20 years now. Thought I'd say hi." I smiled, feeling the awkwardness that comes with meeting someone for the first time. "Yeah, just moved in. I'm, Alex." He nodded, surveying the yard. "House looks good. You'll like it here. Quiet, friendly folks mostly. Only thing you need to watch out for are the stray cats. They like your garden beds more than mine." We laughed, and I went back to my boxes, thinking nothing of it. Martin became a familiar presence over the next few weeks. Every morning he'd be out on his porch sipping coffee, waving at anyone passing by. Occasionally he'd stop for a chat, asking how the move was going, if I needed help with anything. He was friendly, maybe overly so, but I appreciated it. It wasn't until about a month in that I started noticing small things, odd little occurrences that made the back of my neck tingle. At first, it was subtle. A chair slightly moved in the living room when I was sure I'd left it in place. The garden gate swinging open even though I was certain I had latched it. Small footprints in the yard, in the damp morning grass that didn't belong to my dog. I brushed it off. Maybe the wind had blown the gate open. Maybe I'd forgotten to tuck the chair back properly. And the footprints? Could have been a neighbor's kid wandering through, or a stray dog. I tried not to dwell on it, focusing on unpacking and settling in. Then came the first time I saw him looking. I hadn't noticed him at first. He was standing near his front window across the street, just behind the curtains. But as I watered my plants, I caught a flash of movement, a shadow of a figure tilting its head, as if watching me. I froze, gripping the hose tightly, and then just as quickly, the shadow disappeared. I told myself it was nothing. Martin could be watering his plants, or maybe adjusting a curtain. But the feeling stayed, the feeling of being observed when no one should be watching. Over the next few weeks, these moments became harder to ignore. I started noticing him at odd times, not just during the day, but late in the evening, standing silently behind a window, sometimes with binoculars pressed to his eyes. At first, I convinced myself it was a coincidence, that I was imagining things, but when I checked my security camera one night, the footage made my stomach drop. There he was, crouched in his yard, watching my backyard through the faint glow of the porch light. I didn't know what to do. Calling the police felt extreme. He hadn't done anything overtly threatening, just watched. But the fact that he did it consistently, almost every night, made my chest tighten with anxiety. I started sleeping with the blinds closed, double-checking every window before bed. The feeling of being watched followed me everywhere in the house. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront him, but not directly. I set up my phone in the backyard, left it recording, and sat inside pretending to read. I wanted proof, something undeniable, before making a move. Hours passed. Around midnight, I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. My heart pounded. There he was, slowly stepping into my yard, pausing, scanning the area as if calculating something. He didn't leave immediately. He lingered, crouched low, watching the back door as if waiting for me to appear. I froze. My hands were clammy, and my mind raced. Should I yell? Call out? But something told me that any sudden action might provoke him. After what felt like forever, he finally retreated, slipping back into the shadows and disappearing across the street. The next morning, I installed extra cameras, motion sensors, lights with alarms, everything I could think of to reclaim some sense of safety. Reviewing the footage was unsettling. There were nights I didn't notice him at all, But then he'd appear for minutes, sometimes hours, just standing silently, never touching anything, never making a sound, just watching. I didn't sleep well for weeks. Every creak, every rustle in the yard made me tense. The house I had loved so much suddenly felt like a cage. I avoided the backyard at night, never stepped out without checking the cameras first. Eventually, I decided to confront him directly. One afternoon, I walked across the street trying to appear casual. "Martin," I called, "can we talk?" He looked up from his garden, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Of course, Alex. Everything all right?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. I've noticed some, things. At night, watching the yard." His smile didn't falter. "Watching the yard? Oh, you mean when I'm just checking on things?" His tone was light, almost dismissive. "I worry about the neighborhood, break-ins, stray animals, nothing personal." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to push harder, tell him that I had seen him on camera, that it wasn't just concern, it was invasive. But something about his calm demeanor made me hesitate. Instead, I nodded and walked back home, feeling a mix of relief and lingering dread. Weeks passed, and the tension never fully lifted. He never entered my yard again that I could see, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I noticed subtle things. When I left for work, lights flicking on briefly, shadows moving behind curtains. I installed more cameras, and the footage confirmed my fears occasionally. A silhouette passing by, lingering at the edge of my property, disappearing before I could confront it. Eventually, I moved. Not because I was forced, but because the mental strain became too much. I couldn't shake the paranoia, the anxiety that no matter where I went in that house, someone was always observing. Packing up was bittersweet. I loved the house, but I loved my peace of mind more. The day I left, I glanced across the street one last time. He was on his porch, smiling and waving, as friendly as ever. I waved back, a hollow gesture. I moved miles away, changed my routines, tried to put the experience behind me. But sometimes late at night, when the street is quiet and the curtains are drawn, I catch myself checking the window, half expecting to see a shadow, a pair of eyes, watching. And I realize that some fears don't leave no matter how far you go. If you ever think your home is truly safe, I hope the first story reminded you otherwise. Just when you feel secure, it can hit, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. My next story comes from a small apartment complex, where safety was assumed, routines were predictable, and yet the sense of peace could vanish in a single night. I had recently moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a quiet building. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a place to call my own. The rent was fair, the neighbors quiet, and the street below had minimal traffic. I thought I had made a good choice. The first few days were uneventful. I met the building manager briefly, exchanged polite greetings with neighbors in passing, and started settling into my space. One neighbor, however, caught my attention from the start. A young woman named Claire, who had recently moved in on the same floor, kept mostly to herself. She was shy, often with her headphones in or a book in hand, and she avoided prolonged interaction. We exchanged brief hellos, nothing more. I didn't think much of it. Shy people are common after all. Things started subtly. At first it was small, almost forgettable details. My apartment door left slightly ajar when I was certain I had locked it. A cushion moved from its usual place on the couch. My keys not exactly where I had left them. I told myself I was probably just tired, absent-minded from work, or misplacing things. But it didn't stop. Late one night, I was sitting at my desk, working on a project, when I heard the faint click of my front door. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, listening. Nothing. I got up, cautiously approached the door and checked the lock. It was secure. I chalked it up to the old apartment door mechanism clicking in the wind. Over the next few nights, the occurrences escalated. I began hearing footsteps outside my door, slow and deliberate, sometimes pausing, sometimes retreating. The elevator would arrive and depart at odd hours, even when I knew I hadn't called it. Packages I had left inside were occasionally slightly moved. Small, insignificant things, but when repeated night after night, they started to weigh on me. I tried rational explanations. Maybe the neighbors were careless, maybe maintenance staff needed access. But my gut told me something wasn't right. I decided to set up a small camera in the hallway outside my apartment. Just a subtle one, not too obvious. something that would capture any unusual movement without alerting anyone. The footage from the first night was unsettling. At around 2:30 a.m., I saw the hallway light flick on. A shadow passed in front of my door. The door opened slightly, just a few inches, and then closed again. No one else entered the frame. I rewound and watched multiple times. I knew I hadn't done it, and no maintenance staff worked at that hour. The next day, I mentioned it casually to Claire in the hallway. "Hey, have you ever noticed the door to my apartment acting weird at night?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. She looked at me, startled, then shook her head. "No, nothing like that," she said, her voice tight, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of concern, maybe fear. I didn't press it. Days passed, and the events continued. Sometimes, I would hear faint whispers or the sound of breathing when I was alone in the apartment. The door would creak open for no reason, or I'd find the lock in a different position. The sensation of being watched intensified. My normally calm apartment began to feel like a trap. I decided to confront the situation more proactively. I installed a few more cameras, one in the living room facing the hallway door, one discreetly near the window, and a motion sensor near the entrance. I also started keeping a log of everything unusual, times, dates, and specifics. Then came the night that changed everything. I had gone to bed early, exhausted from a long week at work. Around 1 a.m., I was awakened by a faint sound, the soft click of the door. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone and opened the camera feed from my desk. The screen showed a shadow moving silently in the hallway. I couldn't make out a face, but the figure stopped directly in front of my apartment. The door creaked slowly, inch by inch, as though someone were testing it. My mind raced. Should I call the police? Should I confront them? I didn't want to make a wrong move. I watched as the figure seemed to hesitate, then quietly slip inside my apartment. My stomach dropped. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched as the door closed behind the figure, leaving my apartment shrouded in darkness. I waited, terrified, until the first signs of dawn. When I finally dared to enter the living room, everything appeared normal. Nothing had been stolen, nothing obviously damaged. But the feeling of violation lingered. The next day, I reviewed the footage frame by frame. The shadow was unmistakable, a tall, thin figure, deliberate in movement, moving silently through the hallway. And the door had indeed opened from the inside. Whoever or whatever had entered didn't leave any trace, no fingerprints, no disturbed objects, except for the subtle movements I had noticed over the past weeks. I informed the building manager discreetly. "I think someone has been entering my apartment at night," I said carefully. "I have footage." He frowned, taking the memory card from me. After a few minutes, he returned it, his expression unreadable. "We'll look into it," he said, though I could sense a hint of skepticism. The incidents continued for another week, until one night, the door remained open a little longer than usual. I had stayed awake, pretending to sleep, and waited. Around 2:45 a.m., the door creaked and the figure appeared again. I bolted upright and flicked on the lights. The figure froze. And that's when I realized it was Claire. The neighbor I thought was shy, the one I had casually mentioned the door issues to. She looked terrified, her eyes wide, as if caught doing something she didn't want me to see. "Claire?" I whispered, my voice shaking. She didn't answer at first. Then in a low voice, trembling, she said, I didn't mean to scare you. I think someone else is here sometimes. I wanted to check to make sure you're safe too." I stared at her, bewildered. "Someone else?" She nodded. "I've seen shadows, footsteps, things moving. I thought I was imagining it, but I installed a camera like yours. I saw them. Sometimes they move things, open doors. I didn't want to get you involved, but I was stunned. It wasn't Claire all along. It wasn't her entering my apartment, just checking, trying to protect me in her own quiet, anxious way. The reality didn't make the fear any less intense. The idea that an unknown presence had been slipping into my apartment, night after night, was terrifying. We called the police together, showing them the footage. They searched the building thoroughly, checked for anyone suspicious, and installed additional security measures. No one was ever caught, but the nightly disturbances stopped after that. Even now, I can't fully explain it. The exact identity of the intruder, their intentions, or how long they had been entering apartments unnoticed. But that experience changed me. I double-check locks, keep a vigilant eye on my surroundings, and never underestimate the quiet moments of a supposedly safe building. Sometimes I still feel that subtle chill, the sense that someone could be just beyond the door, testing, watching. And while the cameras and locks provide some comfort, I know one truth: a home isn't truly safe until the unknown has been accounted for, and even then, some fears linger in the quietest hours of the night. If you thought being watched from across the street or having someone enter your apartment at night was unnerving, this next story is something else entirely. It's the kind of fear that sneaks into your mind slowly, festers, and makes you question every interaction you once considered harmless. It began in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac, the kind of street where children ride their bikes freely during the day and neighbors wave as they water their lawns. I had just moved into a modest house there, a two-story home with a small yard, surrounded by similarly neat houses. It felt perfect, safe, normal. The neighbor who would soon turn my sense of security upside down seemed ordinary enough. Her name was Lisa, always smiling, always polite, offering small favors, a cup of sugar, a plate of cookies, casual compliments about the garden. At first, I thought she was just friendly, the kind of neighbor you hope to have. She fit right into the comforting suburban picture. Weeks went by, and everything seemed fine. Then came the little things. Small, seemingly harmless oddities that started to pile up. Notes left on my doorstep with vague messages. Hope you're doing okay, or saw something strange yesterday, be careful. I didn't think much of them at first, chalking them up to her kindness or quirky personality. But then things started moving inside the house. A picture frame slightly tilted, a kitchen towel out of place, items on my desk nudged to one side. Each incident alone seemed trivial, but when combined with the notes and Lisa's overly attentive presence, a gnawing unease took root. I began noticing her almost everywhere. At my mailbox when I stepped out, walking her dog past my yard exactly at the times I would be gardening, even standing silently at the edge of my driveway, smiling as if she had every right to be there. At first, I laughed it off, thinking I was being paranoid. But the feeling didn't go away. Her smile didn't falter. In your house? Oh, Alex, I would never. She hesitated, the faintest tightening around her mouth. I only sometimes check to make sure everything is okay. I've noticed some strange things in the neighborhood. I thought I was helping. I stared at her, unsure whether to feel relief or deeper fear. Helping? This didn't feel like help. It felt like a breach, an invasion. Her casual demeanor clashed with the unsettling reality of what I had seen. That night, I installed more cameras, motion detectors, and even changed the locks. But the feeling didn't leave. It never fully does. I started noticing more. Her silhouette appearing outside my windows at odd hours, the faint scratching of her dog's nails on the sidewalk at midnight, the occasional faint sound of a door closing, even when I was alone. Weeks passed, and the tension escalated. The sense that she was always present, always watching, began affecting my daily life. I avoided going out unless necessary, double-checked every corner of the house, and started questioning my own sanity. Friends noticed the change in me. You seem on edge, they said. Maybe it's just stress. But they didn't understand. This wasn't stress. It was fear. One evening around dusk, I decided to stay up and observe. I watched the cul-de-sac from my living room window. The neighborhood looked peaceful. Kids riding bikes, neighbors chatting on their lawns. And there she was, walking slowly past my house, smiling at nothing in particular, stopping to glance at my window. My pulse raced. I grabbed my phone, ready to record, but she disappeared down the street as silently as she had appeared. The next night, the terror reached its peak. I was in the living room, trying to calm myself, when I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. I froze. My camera feed showed her standing there, smiling that same unnerving smile. But this time, she didn't leave immediately. She walked slowly, deliberately, glancing around as if inspecting every detail. My hands trembled. I had to act. I called the police. Within minutes, they were at my door. When they entered, she had vanished. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing. Just the lingering evidence of her presence. The officers assured me they would patrol the area more frequently, but the damage was done. The psychological impact lingered. Lisa continued to live across the street, always smiling, always friendly in public. No one else seemed to notice anything amiss. And yet, every time I saw that smile, I felt the same gut-wrenching unease, a reminder that someone's friendly exterior can hide something terrifying. Even now, years later, I drive past that cul-de-sac and feel my chest tighten. The friendly smile of a neighbor, the one you trust, the one who waves across the yard, can sometimes mask a presence far more terrifying than you ever imagined. If the friendly smile of a neighbor can mask terrifying intentions, and if a community you thought was safe can suddenly twist into something hostile, then the next story digs even deeper into the kind of fear that lingers long after the moment has passed. Because sometimes, horror doesn't come from footsteps in your hallway, or shadows at your window, or the stranger across the street. Sometimes it seeps into your life in the most ordinary way possible, through something you use every single day. This is the story of the late-night calls. I moved into a small townhouse after finally saving enough to leave the chaos of apartment living behind. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A modest 2-story unit in a quiet development on the edge of the city. Families lived here, retirees tended their gardens, kids rode their bikes on the sidewalks. It wasn't the kind of place where you worried about crime. For me, it was supposed to be a fresh start. I had spent years in noisy apartments, neighbors screaming at each other, paper-thin walls that carried every sound, and landlords who refused to fix anything. I wanted peace, a driveway of my own, a tiny backyard where I could drink coffee in the morning. Just stillness. And at first, that's exactly what I got. The first week in the new house felt like a dream. I arranged my furniture, set up my little office upstairs, bought a couple of plants to make the place feel alive. Nights were calm, almost too calm. I'd sit on the porch and listen to sprinklers ticking in the distance, the faint hum of cicadas, the soft glow of porch lights winking on in unison. I felt like I had finally done something right with my life. But peace doesn't always last. The first time my phone buzzed late at night, I barely thought about it. It was around 1 in the morning. I had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV still flickering. When I picked up my phone, I saw the number was unfamiliar. I assumed it was a wrong number. The message simply read, "Are you awake?" I frowned at it. At that hour, it had to be a mistake. Probably someone drunk texting the wrong person. I almost typed back "wrong number," but decided against it. Ignoring it felt safer, and so I did. The next morning, I had almost forgotten about it, but the following night, at nearly the exact same time, my phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time the message said, "You left your light on upstairs." That made me sit up, because I had left my bedroom light on upstairs. Not on purpose, just out of laziness. I told myself it wasn't unusual. The window probably faced the street. Maybe a neighbor noticed, but I couldn't shake the unease that prickled at the back of my neck. I didn't reply. The third night, the text came again. "I like the book you're reading." This time my stomach dropped. The book was on my coffee table, face down. The title visible, yes, but only if you were inside my home. I remember looking around, scanning my living room as though someone might step out from behind the curtains. I locked the doors, checked the windows, told myself I was overreacting. But deep down I knew something was wrong. And that's when the calls began. The first call came on a rainy Thursday night. My phone rang, same unknown number flashing across the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. At first, there was nothing, just silence. Then, faintly, I heard breathing. Slow, steady breathing. "Hello?" I said. My voice cracked slightly. The breathing continued. Then the call ended. I sat there, heart pounding, staring at my phone. I tried blocking the number, but the next night, another call came. This time from a different unknown number. It became a pattern. Always around 1 or 2 in the morning. Sometimes silence, sometimes breathing, sometimes faint noises in the background, like footsteps or a door creaking or whispered words I couldn't make out. I started dreading the nights. My once peaceful home became suffocating. I'd sit on the couch, phone in hand, waiting for it to buzz. I confided in a coworker about it. They told me to change my number. I thought about it, but something inside me felt like it wouldn't matter. These weren't random prank calls. They were personal. And then one night, the caller spoke. The storm outside rattled the windows. Thunder rolled in the distance. My phone rang at 2 a.m. I answered, and for the first time, a voice, low, distorted, said four words that froze me in place. I can see you. That night, I barely slept. I sat with the lights on, blinds drawn, double-checking every lock in the house. My heart raced at every creak, every car passing in the street. The next day, I bought blackout curtains. I stopped leaving lights on upstairs. I even turned off the TV earlier, trying to give whoever this was nothing to observe, nothing to comment on. But it didn't stop. The texts shifted. Instead of vague statements, they became specific. You look tired today. That shirt doesn't suit you. Don't drink so much coffee. It keeps you up. These weren't things a stranger could know from outside. Whoever it was, they weren't just watching the house. They were watching me. At work, I became paranoid. Every colleague felt like a suspect. I scanned the parking lot for unfamiliar cars. I started checking my phone obsessively, terrified and yet unable to stop. I called the police once, explained the situation. The officer listened politely, then told me unless the caller threatened me directly or trespassed on my property, there wasn't much they could do. "Change your number," he said. "It's probably just a prank." But it didn't feel like a prank. One night I tried ignoring the calls. I turned my phone off completely. For the first time in weeks, I thought maybe I'd sleep. But at 1:30 a.m., there was a knock at my door. Slow, deliberate. When I checked through the peephole, no one was there. A minute later, my phone, powered off an hour earlier, buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a text from that same unknown number. "Why aren't you answering?" My blood ran cold. The harassment went on for weeks. My life became a cycle of exhaustion and fear. I started missing work. I barely ate. Every sound in the house felt magnified, every shadow suspicious. Then came the breaking point. It was 3 in the morning. My phone buzzed, another unknown number. I answered, voice shaking. The caller whispered, almost gleefully, "Check your back door." I froze. Slowly, I turned my head toward the kitchen. And there it was, the back door swaying slightly open. I dropped the phone, heart pounding, grabbed the heaviest object I could, a cast iron pan from the counter, and called 911. By the time the police arrived, the yard was empty. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing. I tried explaining, but their skeptical looks told me they didn't believe me. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The next day, I put my house up for sale. I moved out within a month, leaving behind the furniture I couldn't carry. I didn't care about the money, I just wanted to escape. And for a while, things were quiet. No texts, no calls. Until one night, a few weeks after moving into my new place, my phone buzzed at 1:14 a.m., unknown number. The message read, "Nice new house." And to this day, I don't know if the late night calls ever really stopped, or if they're just waiting for the right moment to start again. If the late night calls unsettled you, then brace yourself. Because the story in tonight's collection isn't just about paranoia or an overactive imagination. It's about what happens when trust between neighbors shatters completely. When the person living just a few feet away decides your life is theirs to control. This last one is perhaps the most disturbing of all. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone knew each other's names, where kids rode bikes until sunset, and neighbors waved from their porches. Safety was something we all took for granted, like the air we breathed. That's probably why what happened still haunts me to this day, because it proved that even the friendliest faces can hide the darkest intentions. My family had lived in the same house for years. On one side of us was Mrs. Thompson, an elderly widow who baked pies for the whole street. On the other side was Mr. Harris. He was in his late 40s, unmarried, and had lived alone for as long as I could remember. At first glance, he seemed like any other neighbor. Quiet, polite, kept to himself. He'd wave occasionally when he saw me mowing the lawn, or make small talk about the weather when we happened to check the mail at the same time. But there was always something slightly off about him. It wasn't obvious, just little things. Like how his eyes lingered too long when you spoke to him, as if he wasn't listening to your words but studying you. Or how he seemed to appear out of nowhere, standing in his yard at strange hours of the night. I remember once waking up at 2 in the morning, looking out my bedroom window and seeing him standing by his garden fence, just staring at our house. No cigarette in his hand, no tools, nothing, just standing there, in the dark, unmoving. I told myself it was nothing. Everyone has their quirks, right? Maybe he was just restless. Maybe he had insomnia. But those excuses started to wear thin over time. I showed my parents, but they brushed it off as some kind of sick prank. Probably kids from the high school, my dad said. They've been messing around in the neighborhood lately. But I knew. A week later, I woke up at 3 a.m. to a sound I'll never forget. The slow, deliberate sound of a window sliding open. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, but then I heard it again, clearer this time, followed by the faint creak of footsteps on the basement stairs. Every hair on my body stood on end. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. My dog started barking furiously, claws scraping against the bedroom door. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by my dresser and crept down the hall. The barking grew louder, more frantic, echoing off the walls. By the time I reached the top of the basement stairs, the sound had stopped. Just silence. I stood there in the dark, gripping the bat so tightly my knuckles ached. Finally, I flicked on the basement light. Nothing. The stairs were empty, the laundry machine silent, the window closed. But then I saw it. On the basement table, right where I'd been folding clothes weeks earlier, was another box. Identical to the first one. Hands shaking, I opened it. Inside was another photograph. This time, it was of me sleeping, taken through my bedroom window. I don't remember screaming, but my parents told me later they heard me from across the house. We called the police immediately. They came, searched the property, questioned Harris. But without hard evidence, there wasn't much they could do. Harris denied everything, of course. Smiled politely, told them we must have been mistaken. And when the officers left, I swear he stood at his window and waved at me. We installed new locks, reinforced the basement windows, set up cameras. For a while, things were quiet. Weeks passed with no boxes, no strange noises. I almost convinced myself it was over, but then, the tapes. One morning, I found a padded envelope in our mailbox. Inside was a USB stick. My stomach turned as I plugged it into the computer. The files were video clips, dozens of them, all filmed from inside our house. There were clips of me cooking in the kitchen, my parents watching TV, my little sister doing homework at the dining table, even one of me brushing my teeth in the bathroom. I felt sick, violated. How long had he been inside? How many nights had he crept through our rooms while we slept? We called the police again, and this time they couldn't ignore it. A full investigation was launched. They searched Harris's house. What they found still makes me shiver when I think about it. Hundreds of photographs, boxes of personal belongings stolen from neighbors. And worst of all, a detailed map of our house, with notes about our routines. What time we left for work, when we went to bed, which windows were easiest to access. Harris was arrested, of course. He never admitted to anything, never explained why he did it. But I don't think I need an explanation. Some people are just broken. We moved away not long after. My parents sold the house, and we tried to put the whole nightmare behind us. But even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling of being watched. I cover my windows at night. I check every lock twice before going to bed. And sometimes, when I'm folding laundry in the basement, I catch myself glancing up at those little windows, half expecting to see a face staring back. Because once you've had a neighbor like Harris, you never really feel safe in your own home again. That last story still leaves me uneasy every time I think about it. But the next one, well, it taps into a different kind of fear. It's not about violence or someone breaking down your door. It's about being slowly pushed to the edge, trapped in your own mind, questioning your own sanity, all because of a neighbor who knew exactly how to twist reality until it felt like you were losing your grip. This one takes place inside a quiet apartment building, where walls may be thin, but the terror hiding behind them is thicker than you can imagine. I had just moved into my new apartment when it started. The place wasn't fancy, a small 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of an aging brick building. The rent was reasonable, the street was quiet, and the neighbors seemed polite enough. For someone like me, a grad student on a tight budget, it was more than enough. At first, it felt like a fresh start. I bought a second-hand couch, set up a desk by the window, and told myself this would be where I finally got my life back on track. But then came the knocks. It was a Tuesday night, about 2 weeks after moving in. I'd been up late, headphones on, watching a movie on my laptop when I heard a firm knock on my door. Confused, I pulled the headphones off, and for a second, I thought maybe it was just part of the film. But then I heard it again. Deliberate, sharp, like the sound of someone's knuckles against wood. When I opened the door, a man stood in the hallway. Early 40s, tall, wiry frame, graying hair slicked back. His face was tired but sharp, the kind that looked permanently irritated. "Sorry to bother you," he said flatly. "I live upstairs. You've been making a lot of noise. It's late and I have work in the morning." I blinked at him. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I was just watching a movie with headphones on." He frowned, like he didn't believe me. "Well, I hear it. Heavy footsteps, banging, something dragging across the floor. Just keep it down." I nodded quickly, apologizing again, even though I knew I hadn't made any noise like that. When I shut the door, a weird unease lingered. Maybe the walls were thinner than I thought. I shrugged it off. But that was only the beginning. The complaints came more frequently after that. Every few nights, there'd be a knock. Same neighbor, same complaint. Sometimes it was footsteps, sometimes it was loud music, sometimes he claimed I was dropping things on the floor at all hours. But the truth was, I lived quietly. I wasn't the type to throw parties or blast music. I barely had furniture to even make much noise with. Most nights I studied, watched something quietly, or fell asleep early. At first I tried to be accommodating. I walked more softly, avoided staying up late, even laid down rugs in the living room to muffle sound. But it didn't matter. The complaints never stopped. The strange part was, sometimes he'd knock at times I wasn't even home. I'd come back from class to find a note slid under my door, written in neat, blocky handwriting. "Too loud last night, unacceptable. Be respectful." But I hadn't even been there. That's when I started noticing other things. Faint tapping sounds when I was trying to sleep. Scraping noises in the ceiling, like furniture being dragged, except it was always above my bedroom, and always when I was alone. Once I woke up at 3 a.m. to what sounded like a slow, deliberate thud, 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 as if someone upstairs was dropping a heavy object, pausing, then dropping it again. I pressed my ear to the wall. Silence. Was he trying to mess with me? The next morning, another note waited at my door. 3 a.m. again. Stop. I stood there in the hallway, staring at the paper, my hands trembling. I wasn't the one making noise. He was. The apartment that had felt like a sanctuary began to turn into a prison. I tiptoed around my own space, terrified of setting him off. I'd put down a glass too hard and immediately freeze, waiting for the knock at the door. And it came. Always. Sometimes he didn't even say anything, just knocked hard and fast, then walked away, leaving me rattled and furious. I considered talking to the landlord, but what could I say? My upstairs neighbor keeps accusing me of noises I'm not making. Without proof, it would sound petty. Worse, it might escalate things. So I kept quiet, too quiet. One night, though, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, when I heard it again, the scraping, dragging noise above me. I clenched my fists under the blanket, muttering, "It's him. He's doing it on purpose." But then I noticed something different. The sound wasn't coming from directly above. It was moving, slowly, methodically, from the ceiling above my bed toward the corner of the room where my closet was. My heart skipped. I sat up, listening, every muscle tight. The scraping stopped. Then, a faint creak, not from above, from inside the closet. I stared at the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. For a long time, I couldn't move. Then, gathering what little courage I had, I slowly got out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and yanked the closet door open. Empty. Of course it was empty. But on the inside of the door, scratched faintly into the wood, were 3 letters. Shh. I barely slept after that. Over the next week, the complaints intensified. Notes appeared daily. Knocks turned into pounding fists. I stopped answering the door entirely, but that didn't stop him. The worst was the night I woke to find a fresh note slipped under the door. Only this time, it wasn't a complaint. It was a warning. "You're not alone down there." I dropped it like it burned. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow. Was he threatening me? Or was he hinting at something else? I started keeping the lights on at night, double-checking the locks, even setting up my phone to record audio while I slept. The recordings were worse than I expected. At random hours, faint sounds filtered through. Footsteps, tapping, sometimes even a low humming. Once, I caught what sounded like a whisper right next to my door, too muffled to make out words, but close. Every morning, a new note waited. They began to change in tone, Less about noise, more about me. Why are you awake so late? I hear you breathing. You shouldn't live here. That was when I finally broke and went to the landlord. But the landlord just sighed, saying the man upstairs had been there for years, paid on time, never caused real trouble. He's sensitive to noise, he explained. Just try to be considerate. I wanted to scream. Considerate? I was being stalked, gaslit, slowly driven. No one believed me. The breaking point came a month later. I came home one night and immediately noticed my door was unlocked. My stomach dropped. I always locked it. Always. Inside, everything looked normal. Nothing stolen, nothing broken. But as I walked through the apartment, a sense of wrongness gnawed at me. Like someone had been there, moving just enough to unsettle, but not enough to be obvious. And then I saw it. On my desk, next to my laptop, was a fresh sheet of paper. Same handwriting as the notes. But this time, just 2 words. Look up. My body froze. Against every instinct, I slowly tilted my head back. And there it was. A small, perfectly cut hole in the ceiling above my desk. Rough around the edges, like it had been carved recently. And behind it, just the faintest glint of light, like the reflection of an eye, watching me. I don't remember grabbing my keys or slamming the door shut. I only remember running, my breath ragged, heart hammering as I stumbled out of the building and into the night. I never went back. I called the landlord the next day, told him I was breaking the lease. I didn't care about penalties. When I asked if anyone checked the upstairs apartment, he only said the tenant had left too. Moved out the same night I did. No forwarding address, no explanation. The apartment sat empty for months, and to this day, I can't shake the feeling that it was never about noise. It was about control, about watching me unravel piece by piece until I was too scared to stay. Maybe that was the whole point, and maybe, somewhere out there, he's found someone new to drive insane.